Hey guys, my name is Marvin and I like every type of art. Today, things are going to get spooky. I'll begin with the body of the most terrifying creatures your eyes have ever seen. As with every one of my creations, I start with aluminium foil, crumpling it into a dense, chaotic ball, shaping it against the surface of my crafting table until it's as round as I can make it. It feels almost like the heartbeat of this dark beast waiting to emerge. Then I turned my trusted super Sculpting living doll clay, its soft, supple texture like flesh, waiting to be formed. Off camera, my hands work delicately, rolling the clay smooth with my pasta machine, turning it into thin, pliable layers. Each strip of clay wraps around the foil ball, as if I'm cocooning this monster's soul, building it piece by piece. The creature slowly begins to take shape, hidden beneath its tender, fragile layers, yet the horror to come feels the most tangible. Now I'm starting to shape the top of the ball into the classic pumpkin form. For this I grab my biggest ball stylus and get to work. Then I smooth out the area with my bony fingers. Yes, spooky hands come in handy for this. After that I begin carving the ball with my sculpting tool to give it these iconic pumpkin ridges. Right now it looks more like a basketball, but don't worry, that's about to change. I start pressing the edges of each section deeper into the ball, tweaking the surface little by little, and soon enough it's starting to look a lot more pumpkin-like. Bit by bit I'm pulling it away from that basketball vibe and turning it into something way more Halloween-y. To make the pumpkin ridges even pumpkiner, I start adding more dimension and texture to the surface. For that I use my trusty scrapping tool and begin removing clay from the sides of each pumpkin ridge. These make the section rounder and helps erase any last trace of the basketball look we had going on. Goodbye basketball, hello pumpkin. Once I roughly scrapped away the excess clay, I start removing less and less, just smoothing things out bit by bit, to give the pumpkin a more polished look. Honestly, I think this part of the project took the most effort, and definitely the longest, but you know, perfection takes time, especially when you're sculpting the most terrifying perfect pumpkin. Next I mark out the spots for the eyes and use my scrapping tool to remove some clay, creating 2 eye sockets. Then I roll out 2 little clay sausages and place them above each socket, blending them into the surface to form 2 creepy looking eyebrows. I switch between different sculpting tools to give that eyes that slightly triangular classic rim pumpkin shape, but of course with a more realistic twist. After that I mark where the corner of the mouth will go and start carving the mouth shape into the pumpkin. Then I grab my trusty hobby knife and a smaller ball stylus, carefully scraping away all the clay from the mouth area until the aluminium foil underneath is exposed. It's like the pumpkin is slowly coming to life, one creepy detail at a time. Off camera I've already shaped the upper lip and now it's time to attach it to the pumpkin, which is really starting to look like something spooky. I blend the surface of the upper lip using my spoon tool, adding more definition with my hands to give it that sinister curve. Then I continue working on the surface with my ball stylus. The whole mouth area still needs more building up. Thought because we want this monster mouth to look properly terrifying. Next I attach long strips of clay on either sides of the mouth, shaping them further with my hobby knife. More clay follows for the lower jaw, which I attach and blend into the strips, gradually giving the mouth more structure. I keep adjusting, taking away clay here, adding a little there, refining the corners of the mouth as I go. It's all about experimenting, and honestly, I have no idea what I'm doing half the time, but that's part of the fun, right? Now I start bending the fleshy flaps that still hang from the pumpkin's mouth backwards. Our monster is a cursed pumpkin and also a spider, and every spider has fangs, right? Those creepy little inward curved legs with teeth at the end? Well, that's exactly what these flaps are about to become. I continue shaping the mouth using my ball stylus, and then cave small openings in the fangs for the teeth with my sharp silicone tool. Next I add a little clay sausage to the upper jaw to create the gum line, where I'll later attach the pumpkin's teeth. Then I realized, oh, Super Sculpting living doll is way too soft for spider fangs. So I trim them down with my hobby knife and off camera rebuild the fangs using Super Sculpting original, which has a firmer texture and hold its shape better. With the tip of a toothpick and some baking bond, I attach the new fangs to the leftover stumps on the mouth and blend them in with my fingers, carefully bending them into the right position. Now I'm finally adding the final openings in the fangs for the teeth, and then I return to refining the pumpkin's mouth. Using my carving tool I emphasize the line of the lips and add more details to the lower jaw and the shelf-3 with my small ball stylus. Next the entire surface of the pumpkin gets some attention. I use the ball stylus to add small ridges, cracks and imperfections, because no pumpkin has a perfectly smooth surface, right? By freeing the pumpkin from its perfection, I'm giving it more personality, making it unique. Then it's time for the eyes. I place 2 pre-baked eyes into the sockets. The upper jar get its teeth next, which I made off camera and pre-baked as well. One by one I carefully insert each tooth into the pumpkin skull line. After that, the eyes get the eyelids by rolling out some small clay sausages and place them over the eyes, blending them with my ball stylus. To finish things off, I brush the entire surface with a bit of isopropyl alcohol to smooth out any fingerprints. Then it's time for the first bake in the oven. After the pumpkin had hardened and I took a closer look, I realized I wasn't happy with how the mouse turned out, so I grabbed my hobby knife and tweezers and pulled out quite a bit of aluminium foil from inside the pumpkin's mouth. After all, a real pumpkin is hollow once it's carved, right? I wanted my pumpkin's mouth cavity to be bigger too. Once I removed enough foil, I added a fresh layer of clay to cover up the exposed foil from inside the mouth. The gum line also got a makeover. I attach a new clay sausage to the upper jar and reinsert the teeth, adding a few extra details to the gums. But teeth only on the upper jar just weren't creepy enough. Then I had this idea. What if the spider's shady seaway curved not only downward but upward too? So I sculpted 2 large fangs from clay and attached them to the backward bent shady seaway with a bit of baking bound. Of course, these new fangs also need sharp teeth, which I attach using more baking bound. Finally, the smaller shady seaway got their own set of teeth, which I glue in place with some super glue. Now that's the kind of terrifying grin I was going for. Next I flip the pumpkin upside down and mark the spot where I'll attach the spider legs. After that, I grab my drill and make a small hole at each marked spot where the legs will be fixed later. Once that's done, I clean up my crafting table. Now I pulled out the thickest wire I can find in my drawer and bent it into the shape of a spider leg. I used the first one as a template to shape all the other legs to the same length and form. But then, surprise, I realized I don't have enough wire for 8 spider legs, so my pumpkin will have to make do with just 6. Looks like our monster isn't a real spider after all, it's a fake spider, actually an insect in disguise. For the legs I'm using Super Sculpey Original White Soft. I roll out a long clay sausage for each leg, then split it open with my hobby knife and brush the wire with a bit of baking bound. I place the wire into the opening of the clay sausage and start shaping the clay around the wire, using my hands to mold it into form. Once the clay is evenly rubbed around the wire and I've created the basic shape of the leg, I begin separating the joints with my silicone tool to give the legs a classic spider leg shape. Next I texture the surface using my ball stylus, adding more form and depth. I gradually switch to smaller and smaller ball stylus to refine the details. Once I'm happy with the texture, I attach all 6 legs to the underside of the pumpkin by inserting them into the holes I drilled earlier. Then I blend the gaps as well as the entire underside of the pumpkin with more clay. The spider pumpkin is getting some serious leg action. And now let me tell you the twisted tale behind this grotesque creature. One evening in Homewood, a small city in Alabama, United States, in a little isolated house on the outskirts of a town, a mad scientist named Dr. Melvin Graves was hard at work on one of his latest experiments. He was extracting DNA from a spider when the phone rang. It was his mother calling. Distracted, he set the rusty syringe filled with spider DNA down on the windowsill. But at night the wind howled. A sudden gust blew the syringe off the sill, sending it tumbling out the window and into the garden below. There it landed in the doctor's vegetable patch, striking a plump pumpkin. The needle sunk deep into the flesh of the pumpkin, injecting the spider DNA straight into its fibers. The strange substance was absorbed immediately. Moments later, the pumpkin began to tremble. Without warning, 6 disgusting bony spider-like legs, mixed with a twisted wood-like texture, erupted from its sides. 2 glowing eyes formed on its surface. Beneath them, the pumpkin split open to reveal a massive, gaping mouth lined with razor-sharp teeth. Green slime oozed from its maw, and thus the cursed pumpkin spider hybrid was born. A monstrous abomination, neither spider nor pumpkin, but a fake spider. A hideous creation that prowls the night, looking for its next victim. What I did next you've probably been able to follow along pretty well. I airbrushed the pumpkin in a bright orange, then added highlights with a yellow tone to give the surface some depth. After that, I painted the legs in a rich brown color called Amber. Next up, I applied a black wash to the pumpkin, allowing the dark paint to seep into all the cracks and crevices, giving it that extra texture and detail. I whipped away the excess with a paper towel, leaving just enough to enhance the definition. The legs also got the same black wash treatment, and then I left the whole figure to dry smoothly. Afterward, I painted the eyelids black and gave the eyes a glowing orange outline to really make them pop. Oh, and those little horns above the eyebrows, which I added off camera, I painted them grey. The legs then received a dry brush in a light grey tone, followed by a few more dry brushes using different shades of brown to give them a nice, varied spiderwood texture. As for the face and overall the surface of the pumpkin, I gave it a yellow dry brush to add even more dimension and structure to the surface. Finally, I painted the center of the eyes yellow and blended it into the outer orange edges to create a smooth, soft transition that really brought the eyes to life. I darkened the pumpkin's lips, the eye sockets, the fangs and the inside of the mouth using a heavily diluted brown tone, adding depth to the figure. The gums got a base coat of red, followed by a pink layer with a few white highlights to bring them to life. The sides of the lips were outlined with an even darker brown for extra contrast. Then I painted all the monster's teeth in a nice, crisp white. Even the tiny horns above the eyes got a little decoration with thumb white dots. Next up, I sculpted the pumpkin stem, because of course our monster can't go without one. I rolled out a thick clay sausage and shaped it using my trusty bowl stylus tool. Once it was baked and hardened, I glued it on top of the pumpkin with a bit of super glue. I painted the stem green, adding darker green details and shading. I finished off the tip with a light grey-green color for that extra touch. The teeth then got a beige wash to tone down the bright white, making them look more monstrous. For the final creepy detail, I grabbed some thin black thread, snipped it into short pieces with my scissor and used tweezers to dip each one in super glue. I carefully attached these little threads all over the legs of our monster, mimicking the hairy texture of spider legs. And now for the final step, I mix a bit of UV resin with a tiny amount of toxic green pigment to create a wonderfully slime potion green glow. Using a small pipette, I carefully apply the UV resin onto the teeth and inside the mouth. Then I cure it with my UV lamp. Once the resin is fully dried, I brush the entire mouth and all the teeth with a layer of clear varnish, giving it that final realistic glossy finish. And with that, we're done. Our terrifying accused monster is complete. And now it's time for the final spooky reveal. That's it for this spooky Halloween video, and a huge thanks to everyone who stuck around till the end. You are the one who keep this channel going. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos. Your support helps my channel grow and ensure my contents get seen on YouTube. With that, I'll say goodbye and wish you all an awesomely creepy October.